I'm less likely in 10 years to remember that painting that maybe moved me for a moment in a museum in Paris, let's say, than I am to remember those ladies selling garlic and onions and the side of the road. That is going to be a memory. Or being invited into a gondola grass hut and eating on the floor with locals in Kenya.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 TAC. Get out there and have some fun.
Allan Karl returns with stories from China, Iceland, Greece, and more.
Hey friends, I wanted to share this revisited episode with you and give you a little bit of a warm-up. So we're going all the way back to February of 2017. 8 years and about 900 episodes ago, Allan Karl talked about traveling around China with us, and he was promoting his book, Forks. A lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. Travis is the host for this episode. He did a fantastic job. Since then, Travis has ridden his own motorcycle many thousands and thousands of miles and had amazing adventures of his own. We actually got the book, Forks, and my family, once a week, we would make a recipe from the book, and it was a way of sharing geography with our kids as they were growing up. And we had so much fun trying all the different dishes that were in the book. And at the risk of sounding like an Allan Karl groupie or something, we actually put a map on the wall and we traced Allan Karl's route around the world on the map so that the kids could look at the map and get a feel for where these dishes we were eating came from and what the countries that we read about were like. Anyway, it's been a really fun time for us. And it's fun for me to revisit this episode, first of all, with a classic, Travis Parsons hosting it, and Allan Karl from so long ago. Now, Allan has had his own podcast since this time. It's called World Rider, and he has a few episodes out with some really cool guests. Hey, it might be fun to get Allan Karl back on the Adventure Sports Podcast. We can catch up and see what he's been up to. Anyway, this is a fun episode. I mean, Travis and I have done so much motorcycle riding since this episode came out, and I'm sure that Allan has as well. So good memories for me. Hope you enjoy it. Allan Karl, World Rider in China. Here we go.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Sports Podcast. This is Travis. Well, our longtime listeners might remember my next guest. He was on episode 6 almost 2 years ago, back in March of 2015, and he's Allan Karl, World Rider. If you guys recall, Allan was on the show talking about his motorcycle exploits around the world, where he rode 62,000 miles through more than 60 countries. It took him 3 years to do it. And he wrote an awesome book about it. The book is Forks, A Quest for Culture, Cuisine, and Connection. And if you guys remember, it was all about the recipes that he found all around the world. So, Allan, first of all, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Travis, great to be here. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, it's going to be great to catch up with you. So, Forks, let's talk about that just a little bit. You've been on a book tour. I saw that you had outfitted a cool Mercedes Sprinter and drove across the country working on your book sales. So tell me a little bit about that. How's that been going?
Well, the book really hit great. In Memorial Day of 2014, that weekend, I was on Good Morning America, which really was a great launch to getting that book out, and really brought my story, the book, and the whole idea of not only motorcycle adventuring but also connecting with people over food in a travel scenario to a very wide audience. And I found a used Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, a 2011 model, and wrapped it with graphics all around from the book, photographs. I mean, this is dynamic. You got the book cover on it. You got pictures from people from Africa, South America, and Asia on this. And it's hard to stop somewhere when I do drive that, and people just have these curious eyes and want to know, what is this? And one time, because it says fork, somebody comes up, is this a food truck?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny.
But yeah, I bopped across the country on that probably about 3 or 4 times. The endless nomad in me. If I'm not on a motorcycle, I do like to be traveling. Although certainly in a Mercedes Sprinter, there's it's a diesel. It's not a super powerful machine, and kind of sticking to the interstate. So not the most culturally interesting trip, but I do at these events. The way I did them, Travis, is their bookstores are hard to find anymore.
Right.
I mean, I did. There's a great independent bookstore in Cincinnati. There's another one in Northern California that's very focused on travel up in Marin County, and so of the really cool lasting bookstores, I did do events. I usually speak and sign books, but I wanted to go and do things like festivals, like these public markets that are becoming a real development trend in many markets. I mean, in Washington D.C., I think they've got the Union Market. In Columbus, Ohio, it's North Market. There's one in Charlotte. I can't remember the name of that one, and in Detroit. So these are where small, independent. It's almost like a farmer's market full time with the cover on it. So you've got people selling produce, cheese. There's people serving food, and always little independent local people. And I did a lot of them. It was great to just get out there, and I continue to do it. I literally get sometimes I get calls. The book's been out almost 2 years now. Over 2 years now, and if I can kind of cluster a few events together, I'll load the motorcycle in the back of the van with a pallet of books and go and do an event. And as a result of all that kind of promotion, we're moving into our 3rd printing of the book now.
Really? Wow! Congratulations.
Thanks.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the book, and before we get into your latest travels since the last time we talked. So for those that haven't heard your episode from way back in March of 2015, give us a rundown of what the book is.
Yeah, so Forks, A Quest for Culture, Cuisine, and Connection. It's a coffee table book. It's a hardcover book. It's full cover. It's a little oversized. It's one of those great picture books. So my original concept was to not just write a story about me and my adventures around the world in a travelogue memoir kind of format. I thought really the way to bring this journey, these experiences I had, to people that either are dreaming of their own adventures or maybe never will have the opportunity, but to bring them the world through stories of people and connection through the narrative in the book, to let them see the world through the pictures and the great. I mean, there's probably 600 photographs in this book. There's a lot of big ones and a lot of little smaller ones, and then of course to taste these countries. So the book covers 5 continents. And 35 countries, and each country is represented by a story, by the photographs, and a recipe. And usually that recipe, Travis, is the unique kind of staple, if it were the national dish of that country. And the idea is sit down, with your friend, with your family, or with strangers, and cook a meal together from a country that you probably maybe never even will go, and learn a little bit about it. There's some facts about each country in my book, but there is my little story of my experience in that country, and then that recipe. And this way, it's more of an experiential book as opposed to just a reading book. And much to my friends who will admit, Allan, I don't really like to read that much, so thank you. At least now I can look at the pictures. And whether or not they ever take that into the kitchen, but I like to say that this book looks as good as on your coffee table as it does on your kitchen table while you're cooking up one of those dishes.
Yeah, and it absolutely does. I have a copy of the book, and what a way to dream your way around the world. If you can't get out there and travel right now, then this is what a great book to pop open and just kind of live a little bit of each country. You did a great job with not only the photography, but the write-ups of your experiences in each country.
Yeah, there's lots of stories. There's of course the denouement of the journey in Bolivia when I was on a muddy dirt road and the bike slid out from under me. I landed in the mud and my motorcycle, 400 pounds plus about 100 pounds of what I carried with me, comes crashing down on top of me and crushes my leg, putting a good half a year interruption to my journey to fly back, get medevac back to the U.S. and heal, and then get back on the road again. So there's that those kinds of stories, and then there's stories of like a 80-year-old woman in Ecuador who's trudging up a steep hill carrying a couple jugs of water that are probably 5 gallons each. You know how much water is, and
Right.
and she's 80 years old but walks up this hill effortlessly, and we sit and have an amazing conversation on the side of the road as I learn more about her, the indigenous people that she's part of, this community of indigenous people, and there's great photos, and she ends up modeling for me and next to my motorcycle in the book. So you got some really interesting photos, and it's one of those traveling solo like I do alone. It puts you in more of a chance, more possibilities to connect with people that you would probably not connect with if you were traveling in a group or even with one other, because usually you might just talk to each other and have your own dual experience. And also when you're with a group or a couple people, other people may be less likely to walk up to you for fear of, I don't want to interrupt these two people. So when you're alone, the experience changes a lot. And that story in Ecuador is just one of those examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've put many more miles than just book. I think you're in 80,000 miles at this point on a motorcycle. What drives you to do it? What is it you get out of it? It's obviously not just the motor and the wheels and twisting a throttle. There's obviously something else here.
Yeah, it's interesting that like any enthusiast group, whether you're a bicyclist or you're a kayaker or you're a photographer or you collect cars. I mean, everybody's got different passions, and that is something you become an expert in. You come in it. But for me, motorcycling is one of many passions because I am also a photographer and I write. So for me, it's not the bike itself. It's more about what the bike represents. I mean, yeah, I love the feeling of the wind in my face. The ultimate freedom machine is a motorcycle. You got nothing surrounding you. You got panoramic views, and it's easy to get in and out of traffic. It's easy to stop. It's so easy to find a parking space, and to me, there's no better way to travel, because that metaphor of being open is how I travel. Is I'm very open. I'll just stop on the side of the road. I was in Romania this past summer, and I went through like 3 or 4 little tiny towns. And as I was, buzzing through on the bike, I was just I had a destination, but on the side of the road were these elderly women selling onions and garlic. And finally, when I got to the third town, I'm like, this is it. I got to stop and talk to one of these women. And I pulled over on the side of the road, and the next thing I know, I'm surrounded by 3 different women. They all, sell the exact same things. They live next to each other across the street, and they're wearing clothes that you could tell that they've made. They didn't run down to the department store or to Walmart or anything to go buy those. It was just so rich. So it's that kind of experience to be on a bike, to be able to pull over and stop anytime you want. If you go and travel and take a tour bus, or you fly from one destination and take a tour, it's my opinion, you miss out on really what makes travel so fulfilling and enriching to your experience, and that is local people, local food, not just checking off things from your bucket list. Yeah, I want to see the Eiffel Tower, the Grand Canyon, this and that. I call that checklist tourism. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, I love museums. I love going into these great old medieval cathedrals and things like that. Like when I'm in Europe, or traveling through, spectacular deserts of South America, but and museums. But I'm less likely in 10 years to remember that painting that maybe moved me for a moment in a museum in Paris, let's say, than I am to remember those ladies selling garlic and onions and the side of the road. That is going to be a memory. Or being invited into a rondola grass hut and eating on the floor with locals in Kenya. I'm going to remember that so much more than I am going to be the hippo I saw a couple days before. So to me, it's really that people and that connection. And there's no better way than the motorcycle. And it can be hard. I was in Norway and Finland and Scandinavia this past summer, and it rained and it rained and it rained, and there's nothing fun about riding a motorcycle in the rain, even when you have the right gear. The rain always finds its way in. You get wet, damp, and it's just not fun. And but you deal with it, because those experiences of connecting with people and going into the wild yonder when the weather is good is so much overshadows that pain in the neck that wet rainy ride is.
Yeah, it's miserable while it lasts, but it makes for great memories and great stories. No doubt about that.
Yes. Yeah. My rain suit that I have, it's like that's a big plastic bag, really, at the end of the day, or a nylon thing, and it's yellow, so it's like, a high vis yellow. And so when I have this thing on, and there's a picture of me that I had somebody take when I was at the Arctic Circle in Norway this past summer, and I just look at it. Whenever I see that, I say, God, I just look like a banana on a motorcycle.
Yeah, but everybody sees a banana. That's not a bad thing. That's funny. So connecting with people is obviously a big, important thing to you. And it's something that many of us, if not most of us, are guilty of. I know I'm somebody that really does need to slow down and smell the roses, per se, and talk to people. I'm guilty of that, just rolling through and seeing the sights and being in the adventure for myself and not so much for the connection with people. So it's something that I personally want to work on after listening to stories like yours. What would you say to people who probably need to break out of their shell a bit, after being on the road for so many miles and so many years? What would your advice to those people be?
Well, there's probably three things, Travis, and you hit the first one right away, and it is important to slow down. So first, slow down and put on your curiosity. I say increase your curiosity quotient. There you go, to get a little alliteration in there, because if you start to wonder a little bit and start asking questions about your environment, as opposed to, as I say, checking things off your list. Yeah, I want to go and do this, that, and the other thing. If you start looking around and being more observing, think of yourself as a writer, a photographer, and not just to get the ubiquitous selfie of you in a famous spot or something like that. But let's say you put on this increase your curiosity quotient and start to ask questions and wonder. And the things like me just seeing these onions and garlic, coming back to that story, just to kind of bring full circle, hanging from sticks in front of these people's houses. Everybody else was plowing through there. And for me, it's like, I'm curious, number one, how many do they sell a day? So I'm always asking, I'm wondering. I wonder, does everybody price it the same way? Because, they're all the same. And are they all growing the same thing? So with a bit of curiosity and certainly, some openness. Now, if you're inherently shy, it can be difficult just to go up to people. But I say to people that are shy is that, the icebreaker in any case where you can just, if you just ask somebody a question about them, maybe not so much asking for directions to this, like, what are you doing? You will find people will open up, and, the next thing you know, you're going to be invited into somebody's house for coffee, or you're going to be invited in for dinner, or they're going to say, oh, you ride a motorcycle. Do you know Jerry down at the, 2 blocks down on the left, he is, got a garage full of motorcycles. Go see him, and you'll see the world kind of open up. So slow down, ask questions, wonder, and approach people. And then the third thing is, try not to get too tied to an itinerary.
Right.
This is where I think everybody tries to do, and I'm guilty too. Trust me. I did 16 countries in 4 months this summer, and there's some places I just didn't have time. But I didn't have an itinerary. That's why some places get a little shorter, get a little longer. If you have that ability to be a little flexible, and you need to build that flexibility into your itinerary. Don't, have a blank day in there where you're not doing anything. Don't sign up for a tour. Don't try to say, we're going to do this, and then in the afternoon we're eating lunch here, and then the next thing you know, if you just are more organic in your travels, you're going to find that things are going to fill that time that are so much more rewarding, and you could have never planned for, and could have never happened on a tour, and that's it. So those would be the 3 things I think for people to be more open to connecting and with people. And, if there's a bonus one, if you, every once in a while, even if you're traveling in a group, is take some time, if you're on a more than a week vacation, is take some time alone,
Break
everybody
away.
kind of have a little bit of an opportunity to explore. And then when you come together over coffee, tea, or wine, or a dinner later, everybody in your group can share that experience. And that's another way to, really start to have a more fulfilling, a richer experience in travel.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk about your equipment a little bit. It looks like you're still riding the same bike.
It's called Doc.
The Doc, yeah. Why is this bike called Doc?
Well, it's a BMW. It's 12 years old now, 2005, and it's a Dakar. And Dakar is the capital of Senegal, a city in Africa, and made famous for the classic overland off-road race called the Paris to Dakar, which no longer takes place in Europe and Africa, and now takes place in South America as a result of some terrorist attacks in 2007 in Mauritania. So since 2008 or 9, I think they had a year off, they've had this race there. So the bike is an off-road. It's a dual sport bike, and BMW. So I just, I don't, it's not like, I don't want to give it a lady's name. I don't want to give it a guy's name. It's Dakar, but it's like Doc, this is my trusty Doc. It's
fitting.
a Dakar. So it's just short for Dakar.
So why is it you chose this particular bike? This is a BMW F650 GS Dakar. Why this one? Why this size?
Yeah. So I, as you know, as we talked about, I do like to go a little bit slower. I don't need a really big bike. The roads outside these great roads of the U.S. that are paved and smooth and perfectly cambered and banked and that once you leave this wonderful continent, and if you're not in Europe, Europe's got some great roads too. You got roads that are either crumbling or it's just dirt, or you got to go in sand. And I want a lighter bike. I mean, BMW makes it great. It's the 1200 GS, an adventure bike is a bike you see a lot of people. They've gotten really popular, but to me, it's too big. The 650 is a single cylinder. In a motorcycle world, we call it a thumper. So it's a dual sport thumper, and it weighs about almost 200 pounds less than that 1200. And and I always I'm loaded up pretty good, so I can't go crazy like I am racing the Dakar, because I'm still I've got to carry my cameras and my computer and all spare parts and things. But it's just the right size for me, that I can load my gear. There's a lot of aftermarket products available that I can bolt on into this bike to give it a little bit more durability, so it will endure these crazy roads that I'm talking about. And the second thing, that the BMW still sells a 650. My bike, as it is, the Dakar, no longer exists. They now make a GS 800, which is a 2-cylinder, but essentially it's just about the same weight, about the same size, maybe a tad bigger than mine. the 650. But the key thing on that 800 GS and mine, compared to the traditional 650, the non Dakar model, and the 650 that BMW currently sells now, is that mine's got a 21-inch front tire, whereas these other motorcycles have a 19-inch front tire. And you might think, well, what does 2 inches make? How can it make that much of a difference? But it does, because as you're rolling over rough roads, you've got that much extra surface area, and on the ground. So you go over a pothole, it can make a pothole with a 19-inch or just a big divot in the road. It can smooth it out compared to the 19-inch. So that's the other thing I like. And it's also got a higher suspension, and I've modified it so it's and I'm 5'8", so I'm not a tall guy, but yet I still can't put both of my feet flat on the ground. I can almost barely tiptoe, and people go, "Oh my God!" And there's all kinds of products, and people try to lower these bikes, but the problem when you lower them is you may get that that little comfort level of being able to stand on the flats of your feet while you're straddling the bike. But, when you do have rough roads, that suspension is going to travel quite a bit. So that extra travel is important, so you're not bottoming out.
Yeah.
Particularly you're carrying a lot of weight. So for all those factors, is why I like the 650 and the Dakar model.
Well, it must have been the right choice. You took it 62,000 miles to around the 3 years that Forks is built around, and you've traveled quite a few more miles after it. You never decided to change it after that trip, so it was a good choice, I guess.
Yeah, and it's right now it's got almost 100,000 miles on it, and I'm trying to think how many miles this past summer I did, but it was probably 18,000 miles. So yeah, it's still going, and there's no sign of any, at least from the engine's point of view, that it's trugging hard. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to know that since the last time you and I talked, I've drank the BMW Kool-Aid and bought myself an F800 GS, and spent many an adventure around Colorado on that bike, and I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic.
And you've got
bike.
some great off-road roads. Even just the fire roads are fun on that thing. It's that's great. I didn't know. All right, so you're an 800. So essentially, you got the more modern model of my bike. So that's good. Yep. Love that bike.
Absolutely.
What color?
Good bikes.
What color?
I got that platinum gray.
Ah, nice.
Yep.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yep, I like that bike. All right. So let's talk about what you've been up to since the last time. Now we covered the book and covered the bike. Where is it Allan Karl has been? I heard some inklings about you filming some footage over in China and up in Iceland for trying to present a pilot for a documentary. So first of all, let's talk about China. I think that's the first place you went since the last time I talked to you.
Yeah, so China, summer 2015. Spent a little more than a month in China, and the idea there was to ride the bike from border to border. At least since the bike had to be shipped into China, into Shanghai. It would be just the international border, and ride it as far north. We went north of Beijing, all the way down to the Vietnamese border at a place where there is the Detian waterfalls. It's I guess it's the largest waterfall in southern China, and that river there, the Detian River, marks the border between Vietnam and China. And I was contacted by a production company who wanted to make a travel show and start it in China, but ultimately film around the world. And their concept, they didn't specifically look for a motorcycle rider. They were looking for somebody who travels with a single mode of transportation. And as they did their Googling, and they found the book, and we went, and it's a lot different. I went on a little while ago, Travis, talking about how important it is to travel alone, to be open. Now I got to kind of recreate this experience, but I got a film crew following me. And on top of that, you got the barriers that I always had in language and culture, but sometimes, yeah, I just want to go and get things moving. But you've got people with cameras, and they've got sound men, and you've got a translator, and oh my goodness, it's sometimes like herding cats. I just want to ride. And
and they're all dealing with technology, which can always implode on us at any moment.
Exactly. This was fantastic. I had been to China, many years before, not on the motorcycle. So this was an opportunity to continue that world ride, or that Forks journey, in a probably one of the most culturally diverse, from the ethnic minorities in the South to the infusion of the Chinese history in the north, from Xi'an and Beijing, one of the largest countries or cities in the world, but a little bit more historical, at least in the center ring, compared with Shanghai, which is really a more modern city. That was a fishing village just 100 years ago, and it has grown to be this mecca of modern, and talk about technology. Incredible thing. And then I get to go out of these cities on the rural roads, and ran into a village where I met a gentleman, and he's making traditional Chinese wood block printing. So basically takes a block of wood, carves it by hand. And by the way, he makes these are like 4, 5, 6 color drawings or ink wood block prints that he's making, and he hand carves each different color, and it keeps it in perfect registration. And talking with him, I learned that he's been doing this for six generations. His family's been doing this traditional sharing Chinese folklore, Chinese stories. I think of it as the Hans Christian Andersen or Aesop's fables, right, of China, and their pictorials, just basically stories told through pictures,
right?
And he's making these beautiful prints, making the inks with natural pigments. So this is he's not running down to the Aaron brothers and picking up some ink or whatever. He's makes everything from there, even the paper. He doesn't actually make the paper, but he gets it from a guy that makes the paper as well, the parchment. And he's got, in 2008 during the Beijing Olympics, the Chinese government recognized him, did a little bit of an exhibition, and used some of his woodblock prints on programs
very cool.
For that Olympics. And then I traveled all the way down, as I said, to the Detian waterfalls. But on the way there, stopping in the Guilin, which is in the Guangxi, I get the province. I may have that wrong, but outside of Guilin, there's these rice terraces. I mean, there's rice terraces beautiful all over Southeast Asia, but here you're now in the south. It's more the tropical part of China, and these beautiful manicured rice terraces that, again, families have been keeping these things for almost 1,000 years. And I meet a woman who belongs to the Hong ethnic minority there. She stands about 4 feet 6 inches. She's probably 77 years old, and her family. She doesn't actually work in the rice fields anymore because it's bending over in those rice fields is too difficult. But what she does is there are some hotels that tourist people can come and look at them, but you can't get your cars to them. You can get your cars to a certain area that's probably about half a mile to a mile away, depending on where your hotel is. And she's got a bamboo backpack that's strapped to her pack, and she carries people's suitcases up. And I'm like, you kidding? You can't bend down and fix that ice, but you're carrying people's suitcases that are. I mean, I saw one a group of Chinese people, and they looked to be about 25 years old, and yet she's carrying their luggage up the road. She's 77.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So what would you say the most jarring thing or surprising thing about China was for you? You go into with at least some sort of expectation, and what was the biggest surprise?
Well, it's the Chinese economy has grown, and there has been so much wealth accumulated there over the last 25, 30 years that, also the largest, most populous country in the world, 1.6 billion people. But, my expectation is I wanted to see the real China. I romanticize about seeing the wall, and seeing the terracotta soldiers and all those, again, the checklist things, you still have to see them. But what I was perhaps even since my last trip is to see the difference between the haves and the have-nots. And these Chinese businessmen are such partiers. They go into these karaoke places and they will buy extremely expensive scotch. And, when you're in there, they charge so much money. And to see the, almost haphazard throwing of money for this party and getting drunk, and then going out to a village and seeing these people wearing shoes that are falling apart, and you're seeing the and it's not so much poverty, and I think the Chinese government is keenly aware of being a socialist government, of providing for the people, so that I never saw poverty so much like I would see in, say, Africa and parts of South America, but you still see this flagrant throwing of money around. I walked into a supermarket, and it's like, this isn't and I'm not in any special area. I mean, I'm in Shanghai, but I was surprised. I'm a wine drinker. I love wine, and I go in there, and on the shelf, I see a bottle of French wine. And I have to, RMB is their currency there, the yuan. And I have to do the calculation. But, here's this very, very, first growth Bordeaux wine. It's just sitting on a supermarket shelf for about $7,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
7,000 US.
US dollars.
Wow.
And it may have been at the top shelf. Maybe there was a little bit of security on it, but there were other bottles that were $500-$600. And again, this is a supermarket, not in so much. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, I must be in a neighborhood where people have this kind of money. And I can't imagine that somebody, walking through is like, let's get some lemons, and
my wife wanted me to pick up
let's
a bottle
get
of wine.
Some ramen noodles, and you want to get a bottle of Lafitte Rothschild?
Wow,
$7,000. Let's go. You know. So that was kind of interesting to me. And then in Beijing, there is this, famous, these cities for terrible air quality. I got real lucky the first day I got into Beijing and could actually see the sun, and it wasn't so bad. But in the inner part of the city is made in concentric rings that span out from the center. And the very center, the inside the one ring, I guess you call it, is the older part of the city. It's where in fact, I think the center of that is the big palace, the Forbidden City there. Mm-hmm. And that is the number one, ring. That's everything radiates from that. So they've kind of preserved around that area the traditional hutongs. These are these courtyard homes that people lived in for 100 years or more, 200 years. And then it gets to be more metropolitan and high rises as you go each further ring out. So, but when I was in that center area, I was amazed to find, as I see in most cities across the world, an expat community that's really thriving in a country where, you'd think of all the places you could be an expat. China has got to be the most difficult. The government is watching you all the time. It's difficult to run a business. There's just a lot of things that I have no mind of. But yet, meeting a guy from Duluth, Minnesota, who's selling grilled cheese sandwiches from a shop there, and a guy from Brooklyn had another shop selling meatballs.
That's
and
great.
Yeah, so you got these and a lot of the expat, as I learned, because there was a there was a lot of them come over here there to teach English, even though they don't speak Chinese. They'll just teach. A lot of people come to go to China to make a little money, get experience to the culture by teaching English. And during the Olympics and leading up to the Olympics, 2006 to 2008, the expat population grew dramatically. I forget what the actual numbers are, and a lot of them chose to stay. This is another guy that I met, a Texan, and actually this guy, I can't remember his name, but he is making pies. The name of his shop, it's in Beijing. You can look on it on the your listeners can Google. It's called Rager Pies. Like, we're gonna have a Rager tonight. And, he'd make apple pies. He makes the cherry pies. So, he's bringing this, Texan America product into the hutongs. And I asked him, and he married a Chinese lady. And I asked him, do you want to go back to the U.S.? And he says, not at all. And when I asked him who are most of his customers, because the pies aren't cheap, and he says, they are mostly Chinese people buying the pies.
Really?
And he has his Chinese wife is real passionate about coffee. They do cold brew coffee, and man, I mean, they are just she is like a coffee encyclopedia, and she speaks good English as well. But yeah, that's what was surprising to find that, quite a different experience than just maybe about 8 hours south, where I ran into a community of people still living in caves. So at one point in the Jiangxi province, I get this all wrong. Somebody will correct me.
We'll forgive you.
But yeah, it's south of Tianjin, where the Apple iPhones are made. So south by a couple hours there. People still live in caves. So of course I've got to go see these caves. I ride my motorcycle up the hills, over around, and when I stop on the side of the road, try to get a layout of where these people are. Suddenly, kids about 6 to 10 years old, 5 or 6 of them, appear out, and I look up, and they're above me on another, like a little cliff looking down, and they all are got like tablets or iPads, and they're taking pictures of it. And then
From their caves?
Then when I finally do get into one of these caves, Travis, that there's like a sofa with a microfiber fabric on there. They've got flat screens hanging inside the caves, and I'm thinking, this is not the the rural, hardworking Chinese cave dwellers that I had seen on a Discovery network program 10 years ago. But things have changed in China, even in the caves.
Wow, they are modern suburbanite cave dwellers. How cool.
Yeah.
It must be a blast to have to kind of do the research and prepare, since you were doing this for a documentary, to look for these kind of things. Because I'm sure there's a lot of things that you come across like that you might not have learned about or sought out if you weren't doing it for a documentary.
Yeah, and the thing is, and what we're doing is we call it a docu-series. So this would be a series. So each country would be a different show. So imagine, think Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a documentary series where we do explore culture. We do explore a little bit of the cuisine. We'll leave Bourdain and Andrew Zimmern to do that, but we're trying to really bring out, things like those cave dwellers, like the woodblock printer, and it was difficult because this is a very small production. I kind of insisted, and they agreed. I didn't take too much twisting the arm. That in order to have the experience that I usually have when I travel and connect with people, you can't have a bunch of big cameras and producers and directors in your face.
Right.
It needs to be cool. So we had a crew of 4, and even that was kind of a lot, but the one thing we didn't have, and in retrospect, it would have been, we did as much research as we could, but we didn't have a, kind of a dedicated research producer, associate producer, tasked with let's find these places.
Right.
So in many ways, just like my original journey, we kind of had to uncover this stuff organically as you went along. And as I mentioned before, how do you connect with people? You got to be curious, and you have to ask a lot of questions of people. Fortunately, we had a translator that could help. I mean, we went to this this city that's one of the older, one of the oldest cities that's well preserved, a walled city. Pingyao is the name of it in China, and we didn't really know anybody there, and riding into this walled city, finding a place to stay, meeting the locals that sit around the street corner and watch the people go by, I finally ended up, walking into a little grocery stand, and the husband and wife that owned it, the elderly people, had a son who had just quit his job at Foxconn, the people that make the iPhones. So it was like all of a sudden I said, this is an interesting story, because you hear a lot about human rights,
Sure.
and poor working conditions, and the slave driving kind of Chinese manufacturing and that. But it gave me a chance to kind of look at that, and he did not have anything negative to say about his experience there. And if things didn't work out in helping his family build up this grocery business, he would be happy, and told me that the employer would happily let him come back. He did say that he met his girlfriend there, and she was still in the factory, and he kind of missed her and was thinking of marrying her. So these are the kind of things that you learn, and you kind of get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, you actually obviously came back for a break, but then it wasn't long, and you actually took off for Iceland, and like you said, 16 countries up there. So tell me a little bit about that. How was Iceland?
So that was great. We came back from China. We actually edited a full-length pilot of the show, showed it to some people, got some feedback, and the show is not sold yet. The tentative name of it is Border to Border, because you go from border to border. And I had always had in my mind, I always wanted to go to Iceland. So while we're pitching the show to networks and studios, I was still planning on this trip to Iceland. And as we got some feedback from them, we learned that maybe we could illustrate, expand upon the idea of border to border. So Iceland was a perfect place. So I shipped the bike to Iceland in end of June last year, flew from the East Coast, and met up with it there. And this is July, should be the most mild weather, the warmest time of year. Boy, but it was biting cold, and I had that rain and sleet and things like that. And I camped as much as I could as well. So it was, there's 3 or 4 days, in Reykjavik, in the capital there, having great food, meeting people. There's one of the most famous rock and roll bands from probably the 80s, and did a couple tours with U2. It was a band called the Sugar Cubes. It's where Bjork kind of started.
Yeah.
I got a chance, and this is again that organic thing. It's like, hey, there's got to be somebody here from the Sugar Cubes. Maybe Bjork is here, but we met Siggy. His name is Siggy, and he's the drummer and kind of the co-founder of the Sugar Cubes, and went to his studio and drank beers with him, and also that Rick here, that what is it called, Brennivin? This Iceland schnapps made with caraway seeds. It's either love it or you hate it, but it's it's like an 80, 90 proof, fire water kind of a drink. But there I am, and with Siggy hanging out, and then making it out to the rural part, going to see the volcanoes, going to see the fishing villages. I went to a bucolic resort, just like 3-room house way in the middle of this peninsula, this fjord, and run by a family for 3 generations, and running the equivalent of a bed and breakfast, but all the food and everything is raised right there. I mean, even the dishes were served with flowers that the woman picked from her field there, just tiny little flowers that are all edible. So that was good. And the roads, now there's a big ring road that goes around the entire country, the island of Iceland, and then you have varying roads in varying kinds of conditions. So we were able to get to a little bit to the interior. We didn't have as much time, and the weather was a little bit of a factor, so I couldn't get as far in as I wanted. But in that whole spirit of connecting with the culture and the people, Iceland was awesome. Those thermal pools, it's a these little hot tubs. That is like a cultural phenomenon. Everybody at the end of the day, every house, most of them have these things, and that's the social area. You get in your bathing suit and you sit in these, naturally heated thermal pools. So really cool place.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
I'd love
Apparently,
to go there like right now because of the when you go in the summertime, you don't see the northern lights, and now would be the northern lights. I went on a fully sustainable kind of a green, carbon neutral, 100-year-old sailing vessel to go watch for whales, and and the little puffins. You ever see these little? They're kind of the equivalent of
birds.
a penguin that flies,
right?
But they're I could talk on and on,
That's cool.
Iceland
looks amazing. Yeah, Kurt and his family went out there just recently, and the pictures he brought back and the tales that he was telling just made me want to take a motorcycle up there and tour it and just check it out. And you got to do it. How cool!
Yeah, that is an experience. I mean, it's difficult to get out there. It's such a small place. You can ride around that whole island, the country, in 2 days.
Right.
If you don't stop. But you want to stop. I was there 2.5 weeks, and then I took a ferry. There's one boat leaves once a week from the eastern part of Iceland, and put the bike on that and went to the Faroe Islands, which is a Danish protectorate in the North Atlantic there. And then from there, continued on, spent a few days at the Faroe Islands, went to a rock and roll festival there. They call it the Woodstock of the North Atlantic. That was real fun. And then over to Denmark. From Denmark, I'll just quickly, tell you the route. We can get into any of this, but Denmark to Sweden, to Norway, to Finland, cross the Baltic Sea to Estonia, then Latvia, and Lithuania, and then into Poland, and then from Poland to Slovakia, into Hungary, and then I went east again into Romania, south to Bulgaria, cross from Bulgaria into Macedonia to Albania, and then Albania into Greece, and ended up in taking about a week on the Greek islands. So total kind of the comfort, the end of the trip, having the most just like, okay, chill, let's drink some good wine, eat some food. And then here's the real kicker, Travis. As I came back from the islands and met, some local people there, I decided to leave my motorcycle in Athens. So as I sit, my 650 Dakar is sitting in a garage in an office building in Athens. So that means, you know what that means, Travis?
You have plans to return. You smart man, you.
I have to go back.
I love it. That's great. So which of those countries was your favorite between Iceland and all the way down through Greece?
Iceland's incomparable, and I have to say I've got a really warm spot in that, and that was the beginning of the journey. And I was there with my film crew. I've really gotten to love, and then the rest of the journey, I had a buddy that joined me for part of it, and then but most of the time I was on my own. The country that really kind of, I guess sometimes when we have expectations, when they're way exceeded, by a high factor, they tend to stick in your mind more. And it goes back, like when people ask me about Forks, what was one of my favorite, in Syria, which I did do, but way back before the conflict,
right,
always is like one of my favorite places. And on this trip, Romania, I was kind of a little apprehensive. I'm like, Romania, what am I going to do in Romania? But they have got just some incredible roads. It's very inexpensive. Your dollar goes far. And, at least in my short week or so that I was there, the people were open, they shared, and I had great weather. In the north, Bucharest is an interesting city. They used to call it the Paris of Eastern Europe. But my favorite was this place called Cluj-Napoca, I think, known just as Cluj, and that's the kind of the capital of Transylvania.
I was going to
Where
ask if you went to Transylvania.
Yeah.
Everybody that goes there has to go.
Yeah, exactly. I got to go to Transylvania and learn about Count Vlad, Dracula. And there are castles that's got the scenery all around. And that was absolutely a great experience. On the other side of it, in terms of at least the cost, Norway is probably one of the most expensive countries I was in. But, the ride is very good roads, a lot of rain, but some of the most stunning scenery on the planet is Norway. So from just a pure visual, I loved Norway. I rode all the way to the North Cape, Nordkapp, which is the furthest northernmost point on the European continent. And that was kind of a little goal. There's a bucket list item. I just wanted to get there and just, gaze off. I'd be, not 500-600 miles from the North Pole or something like that when you get up there. Maybe a little bit further, but not much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Well, I would say if you ever need somebody to also ride a motorcycle with your little crew and carry something, then you know who to call.
I'm going to get Travis is on it, man.
Don't be bashful. Don't be bashful. So I have to ask in Iceland, because Kurt is going to want to know, did you try the rotten shark?
So, the rotten shark is there's a couple things. To answer your question, no, I didn't try the rotten shark, and largely because they serve that mostly in the wintertime.
Oh, really?
Because they don't have they can't get the fresh food in there. And there was another item I gotta remember that is also famous for
being disgusting.
That's another disgusting Iceland food item. So no, I didn't get it. And I know Anthony Bourdain did on one of his episodes, and he even today will say that's the single most disgusting thing, and he eats anything that he didn't. So we couldn't really find it. And then I think on our last day, we ended up going into this equivalent of a gas station convenience store. And there in the back, hanging were like freeze-dried or cellophane packed food, and I was told that was the shark, but we didn't buy it. We had an agenda, but did Kurt try it?
He did. Yeah, I believe he said alcohol helped take the taste out of his mouth. So when in doubt, drink alcohol when you eat rotten shark. That's what I understand. I don't know. I don't think I need to try it personally. I think there's a few things out there I can just leave untouched, and the rotten shark might be one of them.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I probably should have done that, at least for the sake of the camera, if we could have really worked that out. But I did not.
Well, there's your reason to go back. You have a reason to go back to Greece. Now you have a reason to go back to Iceland. So we got that problem solved. Well, let's talk about podcasts. You've been doing a podcast for quite a while now. I think 2006, you've been dabbling in the podcast world. So I wanted to introduce our listeners to the World Rider podcast. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do. It's not all about motorcycles, right?
No, not at all. I tend to be an early adopter in so many things. I had a blog back in 2002 before people knew what it was, and podcasting, in 2006. And originally, and there's still an archive of that on iTunes and on Stitcher and the usual places for the World Rider podcast. But it started off as the audio journal, if you will, of as I traveled around, I tried to be as consistent. When you travel alone, I meet people, I would interview them, and I'd produce a little podcast that was part me, describing where I was, and then meeting people on the road and having them share some stories. And I think as I did travels over that 3 years, I must have done about 20 podcasts between 2006 and 2009. Then when I got back, it kind of fell a little bit to the wayside, and I picked it up when I had a traveler, a guy I met when I was in Ethiopia, who is actually from Finland, and he was riding a bicycle around the world. And I met him in the middle of nowhere in Ethiopia, and 2 years later, after I'd already completed my journey and I was living here in North San Diego, he shows up at my door. And it was a great reunion because we had briefly met, that two passing ships, that we actually stopped and talked to each other and then continued over email sharing our stories. And he showed up here. So I put him on the podcast, and I realized that the World Rider podcast, it's not just about me and my journey, it's about everybody's journey. So I've had authors on that's never even been on a motorcycle. I've had travelers. One guy that over the last 10 years, he has lived in a different country for 1 year. Him and his wife moved to a different country every year, and he has some great, interesting stories. And so what I like to do is get people that travel is a passion, but yet it's become, it's either absorbed them or it's become part of their work. I had a young 23-year-old, 24-year-old guy in here who has been around the world learning how to make wine. And that was my last podcast. So
I was just listening to that one, actually. I really enjoyed it, actually. Here I am tuning in thinking I'm going to hear about motorcycles and world travel and people. And what I heard about, or what I learned a lot about, was about wine. That was a very fascinating show, actually.
Yeah, it was fun, and I was surprised that he was as articulate too, because obviously a good podcast, a good interview, as is there has to be a little bit of connection. Of course, I like wine, but I suggested the podcast just because I had met him in Greece. Well, you heard the story. I met him in Greece, and then it turns out he's from San Diego, so another passing traveler coming through. And then I've had Neil Bailey, who is probably, one of the famous motorcycle journalists. He's from the UK.
Yep.
And he is a very fascinating guy who's ridden more different kinds of motorcycles. So, we do get into motorcycling, but I want your listeners and anyone listening to that, and I'm not really consistent because I obviously travel so much and trying to get it. You guys have been great, by the way. I mean, what podcast are you up to now?
Oh, we have 244 out now.
Yeah, 244. So
along.
And I was your sixth podcast.
You
so
were
I feel
number
like,
6.
wow, that's. Yeah. So consistency certainly helps. But my podcast, when I do find somebody really interesting, I bring them on, and if you subscribe on iTunes, you'll see that they'll come in on a not very regular basis. But
worth listening to anyway. Yeah, we had Neil Bailey on too. He was actually episode 19. So Neil's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to get all of the adventure sports enthusiasts around the world eventually. So eventually you'll hear them on our show too.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
No,
yeah.
Good show. I enjoyed listening to it. And like I said, I enjoy wine. I am by no means a connoisseur and know what I'm doing. I will probably not go buy that $7,000 bottle in China, but I learned a lot about wine just listening to you guys talking about it. It was a good show. So good job. I like it. Well, if you guys want to check out Allan's World Rider podcast, just looking him up. He's got a website, worldrider.com, and you can find his podcast, of course, there, and iTunes and Stitcher. So, Allan, you are heading out in a couple of days back down to South America, and you're not taking a motorcycle. What is it you're doing? I think this is pretty cool.
I am going to South America for about 2.5 weeks, to Argentina, actually, with my mother. My mother's 80 years old, and she has traveled. She's been to Europe. She's been to Japan, Korea, and has a few countries under her belt, but she's never been to South America, Travis. And her husband, my stepdad, Howard, passed away in November, and he had been, ill for several years. So my mom hadn't really been out, and we got to talking over the holidays, and I said, Mom, obviously when you look at something, bad or a big change in your life, you have to have that recovery period, and you have to mourn and that, but yet you also need to understand that at the end of every road, you find the beginning of another road. And I said, let's go. I've been to Argentina several times. I can be a great tour guide. And what a great thing to just be with my mom, who we all love our mom so much, and to spend that much time, later in her life, and me as much, as an older guy now, to have that experience. So we're going to do, Argentina is really one of the most diverse countries, in South America, because you do have the Patagonia, which is, you got glaciers and, alpine scenery, big mountains, the Andes. You also have Buenos Aires, which is like a European city infused with that Latin culture too. And then you've got Mendoza, which is a wine region and also a farming and just a real cultural center of culinary and food and wine in the center of Argentina. And then you've got the jungles up in near Paraguay and Brazil in the northeastern part, where the Iguazu Falls are, which are the largest, at least from a number of volume of waterfalls in the world, competing very close to Victoria Falls in Zambia there. So we're going to go to those 4 places. So really get a taste of 4 distinct different parts of Argentina. And of course, we're going to see a tango show, because you got to do that when you're in there. So this is a different kind of journey. I mean, she did ask if I was going to get the sidecar hooked up.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, but we were unable to do it. So a total different kind of experience. Although I've traveled, without the bike many places. But yeah, it's just spend time with family. It's at the end of the day, and I always tell my friends this, who are, come to me. He's like, Allan, I think I'm getting a new car. I'm like, well, don't labor too hard about the decision. I says, things are not as important as experiences, and I'd rather invest in those. And this is one of those that I'm investing in.
Yep. Well said. Well, I think it's going to be an amazing time. You're a great son for taking her down there. I think she's going to have an absolute blast. And I think, since you left the BMW over in Greece, I imagine you can probably find somebody over there with a sidecar, and maybe mom needs to go pick that motorcycle up with you.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Gosh.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. All right. Well, good deal, man. It was good catching up with you. You've done a ton of things since the last time we talked, and it's so good to hear about everything you've done. And I wish you all the best in luck in getting that show out there. And I will be first on the list to want to watch it. Absolutely.
And I will keep you, Travis and Kurt, updated on stuff. When I come back from Argentina in mid to late March, we are meeting with some people up in LA, and hopefully we'll have some feedback and maybe be one more closer to getting that on the air. Yeah, I'm very excited. I would love to bring, it's kind of like bring Forks, the book, to life, adding sound.
Sure.
Motion. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Well, definitely keep us apprised, and we'll put it out on our show when it's ready. So I'm sure our listeners would love to look in and see what it is you're up to out there in real film. So, all right, he's Allan Karl. The book is Forks, and you can find him at worldrider.com. You can also find him on Facebook at worldrider.pro, and Instagram and Twitter at worldrider. So go follow Allan and see what he's up to, and maybe he'll get that show so we can all see it. So, Allan, thanks so much for spending the evening with me. I really enjoyed catching up with you.
Travis, it's always great. I'm glad we do it, and congratulations on the podcast. I need to see who's coming next and following again, because you guys get some really interesting things in the world of adventure sports. So appreciate it.
Well, we try. It's our desire to inspire. So listen in and see what else maybe you can get inspired to try something other than motorcycling. But I think you provide enough inspiration for others as you're doing it. So, all right, Allan, have a good evening.
Okay. All right, Travis.